Hello everybody, and welcome to Monster Mondays. It is still Autism Month, so I've prepared a very interesting show for you today. As always, I tend to talk about, monster books or things of the horror thriller genre. Well, now I can go into more depth about the autism side of those types of things. To give you an example, you may have recalled from a previous episode of this show when I had shared this particular book in creepypasta form. The That and the Forsaken creepypasta, that was like episode 1, and what I did there was creepypastas that eventually became this book. Well, the intro became like chapters 1 and 2, and then the actual action that happened in those became chapters 9 and 10, and then we also had an intermediary chapter 11. And what's interesting is in this particular case, he was chasing his girlfriend when he got stopped by the police at the time. And so that's one of the major differences, and also the grammar is, at least I hope, a lot better in this than it was in the original pasta. That being said, this book very much is confusing to a lot of people because the first few chapters seem realistic enough, but then after the first 8 chapters, you get to chapters 9 through 13, and it's like, whoa, when did this autobiography turn into a fictitious work, And I guess probably the best way to explain it is it was intended to be a fictional biography from the very beginning, so I kind of wanted to make a kind of story character that people could relate to because people actually go through some of this stuff, but at the same time give them the happy ending they couldn't give themselves, while at the same time nobody actually getting hurt in the process of making it. Well, no real people anyway. So consequently, for better for worse, however that went, it did mostly its job. It raised awareness of the kinds of issues that at the very least were present at my time, but may still be going on for all we know. That is, they shut down the Cortez PAU that I featured in the first book and also in the creepypastas, but there are still other Cortez school locations that in places like Pomona and stuff right now. I don't know if they're as bad as what I went through or if they've had any sort of reform whatsoever, but it was probably pretty bad if they got shut down, and I remember it being pretty bad. That being said, there's a lot of themes going on with respect to the, whether it's the creepypasta or the book that spawned afterwards. That is, what happens in both cases is we get a character that gets possessed by a book of unspeakable power, and that's kind of where the reality kind of goes away. But is it so much that the reality goes away, or is it more that the character is just now in his head from that point on? Are we to assume that every subsequent book that I've written all exists in this one Catboy's mind, and none of these characters are actually real? Could this just be interpreted as the character coming to terms with what's happened and finding peace in it all? If it's taken as a metaphor, not an actual, this is actually what happened within the context of the fiction, then it's easy to see where there's a lot of parallels to, what a meltdown is like, similar to what I had done in the New Life, New Strife's Nightmare chapter, and also there's a lot of just moments within the story that, whether taken literally or not, very much describe, what what people think the condition is, and in some cases what it is. And so that's why I wanted to explore my series just a little bit. I'm not going to read every single, chapter of every book, but just the important ones that can kind of illustrate my points here. So for this particular theme, we're looking at the fact that Kit Kit and Kit Kat, the ones in this third book, are pretty hyper-focused on the tasks at hand. Now, one could figure, okay, well, they're being hunted. Of course they have to be to survive, right? Well, they're not always under attack. I mean, it could happen at any point in time. But, that one's going to be a little bit of a hard case to make. But probably an easier one would be the fact that this guy, he makes robots out of anything he wants. But he's so obsessed with the fact, and he feels persecuted, that one could say that it's almost like an OCD. He's just got to constantly be making these robots every second of every day, or he'd succumb to the emotions that he'd been repressing for so long. So, or he might also at times come off as being very thoughtless, heartless, just indifferent to how he comes off to other people. But it's not always a bad thing necessarily. In some ways it can kind of be a mirror into how someone's coming off if people just can't be honest with them and be polite at the same time. So there's a case to be made for a lot of this. So I'm going to start with the first book, Adam the Forsaken, Tales of Extraordinary Beings, Book 1. You can also find it on the Forsaken Scribe Shop. And for this one, I'm going to kind of be looking at since they're fairly short, I'll start us off with the first 4 chapters of it, and then you guys already kind of know what happened with respect to the, okay, you know what, I'll go first 5 chapters, and then I'll skip around to, like, the 9 and 10. Reason being they're very short sections, and they pretty much encompass, his motivations and stuff. And I'm probably going to skip chapter 11 because you've already pretty much seen the police interrogation and you know where it goes. They open a book they shouldn't or something like that. You know what? Heck with it, I'll do it anyway. But yeah, some parts may be skipped around just because I don't want to spoil everything. So yeah, chapter 1, Birth of Adam the Forsaken. The tale begins. Adam the Forsaken was born in San Dimas Hospital. His mother, Joanne, and father, David, now had a son to traditionally inherit what the father owned. David is a health physicist, and Joanne was at the time a microbiologist. Adam has 2 older sisters, Kara and Tara. Kara and Tara were a little over 8 1/2 years old when Adam was born. Kara and Tara had begged for a long time to have a baby brother. Although their wish was granted, there is a meaning behind the famous saying, "Be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it." Yes, for a good portion of Adam's infancy, Kara and Tara enjoyed taking care of him like they would a baby doll, but the novelty was not to last. Adam was a curious one and occasionally getting their belongings once he learned to walk. If one asked his father, he might have said the adversity in those early years was keeping his older sisters from killing him. Amusing as it is to imagine, the story truly begins at age 4. And see, that wasn't even a page long for that particular chapter. These weren't meant to be like super long books. I kind of wanted to get people who originally, I wanted to get people who normally don't read, fiction books or don't read anything if they're not assigned to it, to kind of get them interested in it again. And so, chapter 2, Early Learning, the School of Hard Knocks. Adam had his 4th birthday. There was cake and presents abound. Adam was delighted to partake of cakes and other goodies shaped like his favorite icons of the early 1990s. To some who lack an understanding of human culture, it might look somewhat barbaric to eat pictures of what one loved. But this is commonplace in our modern age and seldom given much thought. Now, that sentence, paragraph, however you want to call it, seems a little unnecessary, right? Well, actually, it's intended to foreshadow the second book. I had planned to make a second book about it, so that's why I put that line there. After enjoying a delicious cake, Adam decided to play with some other human children. It should be noted there were no other cat hybrid families around. Thankfully, they were able to blend in by hiding their cat tails in their pants. Their ears were the same color as their heads. Their excuse for appearing to not have ears was it was a birth defect, but they could still hear without them. Because Californians value vanity, they wore prosthetic human ears. Additionally, they were the only known Jewish family on the block. Regardless, it didn't seem to bother anyone from what he could tell. Adam enjoyed the company of others and was probably one of the happiest kids anyone would ever meet. Neighbors of interest at this point included the Major family. The Major family consisted of Steve, Heidi, Sarah, and Scott. The Major family lived in the house to the left of Adam's and had a pool built in their backyard. Moreover, their home was 2 stories tall, just like Adam's. The neighbors to the right of Adam's house were the Brown family. The Brown family consisted of Guy, Maria, and Nikki. They were one of only 2 African-American households in the neighborhood. After a happy birthday celebration complete with presents and toys, it was decided Adam would be enrolled in preschool to nurture social skills and early learning. Adam's days from that point on were fun and carefree. As far as he knew, friends seemed to come and go, and when he asked, his mom would usually say, "I got mad at their mother." Adam only had friends because his mom was friends with their mom. He kept to himself otherwise and was pretty independent when it came to playtime. That's one of those, autistic spectrum things is, it's not that we necessarily hate others, it's just we're more comfortable when we have full control of our play environment. That is, since we don't have a lot of control in other aspects of our lives, we like to have that one place that, we can always control what's going on. It sounds selfish as hell, but is it really, when you think about it? Do we not all seek for that one space we can do what we want because we can? That's pretty much all it is. Okay. This lifestyle could not last long. One morning, his mother and father left for work. Adam didn't want to go to preschool that day. Adam had no way of knowing the irresistible opportunity the decision presented to Tara and Kara. Weeks ago, his curiosity got the better of him, and worse still, the sisters were developing hormones that made them irrational at times and overall hard to be around. Adam went downstairs to eat breakfast. After eating breakfast, Adam headed upstairs to play with his toys in his room, but was stopped. Tara was the first to speak. "Where do you think you're going?" Adam replied, "I'm going to my room, and I will play with my toys." Tara replied, "Not right now, you won't. We have some unfinished business to take care of here." Kara and Tara approached Adam with their fists ready to beat him up. Adam asked, "What did I do?" Adam cried out, "Please don't hurt me." Adam was cornered and punches were thrown by Kara and Tara, and although they left no noticeable bruises, they still hurt. Adam had never been in one of these violent situations before and didn't know what to do. They continued to beat his body with their punches and kicks even when he was lying on the ground. Adam screamed for Mom in pain. Tara and Kara said in unison in a taunting voice, "Mom's not here." Adam was in tears and in pain. The amount of time that went on for this remains unknown. To Adam, it felt like they'd done so all day and enjoyed the sound of his screams and cries of pain and sorrow. By the time his parents returned home, it was all over, and Adam hugged them in tears. His sisters had gone back to their room. Joanne and David assumed Adam had missed them. Adam didn't know how to tell them what had gone on and could not understand long-term consequences. In other words, if their actions didn't happen in the instant he did something wrong or was wronged, he couldn't make the connections of cause and effect. Therefore, if they decided on any punishments later, it was his belief they got off scot-free. From that day on, he never wanted to stay home from preschool again if he had the choice. When Adam was in preschool, songs were sung before meals to teach self-control. If one could wait until all the nonsense was done, he'd be allowed to have seconds for snacks and meals if desired. If he was too hungry to wait for the singing dandy, he only got one helping. All children in preschool wore name tags that were put on the shirts of the children each day they were there. On Tuesday, it was Music Day. On Music Day, a child got a sticker every time they answered a question correctly. For example, "What instrument is this?" Children were not expected to just know what the answer was, so the instructor would pull out instruments and name them, ask the class to repeat them, shuffle them, and then ask the question. In other words, it was more a test of their visual and auditory memory. If a child answered it correctly, they got a sticker to put on their name tag. Adam always raised his hand to answer the questions. Never in his entire year at the preschool did he get a single question wrong. Adam would always come home on Tuesdays with a name tag glittered in stickers. His parents never knew why, but they smiled supportively as he showed them off nonetheless. As fun as the preschool was, Adam met his first bully there too. His name was Paul. Paul, for whatever reason, seemed to enjoy punching people in the classroom, even if his punches weren't enough to knock anyone over. They did sting. Adam would always tell him, but at worst, Paul got was a scolding. In fact, he was the only one in the preschool who got a pillow during nap time. Adam came to the conclusion hitting is okay if you're angry, even if people don't like it. He would soon learn the notion doesn't apply to everyone. Like any good scientist, Adam explored that hypothesis and got sent to the office for hitting a kid who made him angry. Adam's conclusion was anger is bad and one must not get angry unless they want to get in trouble. Music and snacks were not the only thing Adam enjoyed. He would sometimes play on swings or other playground equipment. Other days he'd lay on a bench and pretend to sleep, while in actuality he'd be staring into the clouds, reflecting on life, pondering his purpose in it. Sometimes his efforts alone would be fruitless. When that happened, he would enjoy asking adults that would talk to him questions about why things happen. He would later call these discussions of life to people older than him Socratic dialogues. Adam didn't understand the purpose of socializing. He did, however, find it an enjoyable way to share knowledge and get different perspectives on life. In kindergarten, he would learn not everyone his age shared his sensibilities. What that means is they didn't have the same kind of vocabulary, and he was used to dealing with people older than him, so trying to speak in a way that people his age could was probably one of the bigger difficulties. And that's a very stereotypical trait of people on the autistic spectrum at times. They tend to have what I mentioned in a previous video, little professor syndrome. That is, they could go on and on about things and use all kinds of words that they might have heard their parents use and have some sense of what it means. But people would be like, what? And yeah, that's pretty much what it was. Now, that was pretty much the part that was mentioned in the creepypasta, but was never actually shown in the creepypasta, because the whole point of the creepypasta was to make it horror-based and less relatable. That was my thought, anyway. And then we have the chapter 4, first grade. I skipped past kindergarten because there wasn't really much to tell there. But yeah. This was pretty much, you might remember in the New Life, New Strife, Claude had mentioned, man, I can't believe they still teach cursive. Well, this was kind of what kind of hell that he would have gone through as well. Only the difference there is his parents were smart enough to move him the hell out of there before things could get to the level that he was seeing in his head, because what he can now do is he can now see what happened in the canonical timeline, so he'll do everything in his power not to let this story come into fruition for himself. And so it goes like this. The first day of a brand new school year had begun. Adam was 6 years old or close to it and had taken on a different personality. Once Adam finally knew he was a boy, yeah, he didn't know that before because nobody ever told him. He figured, well, okay, he never really questioned anything. And since he was with his, family a lot, mostly his mom and sisters, they had to take him to the girls' room, so, oftentimes out of habit, he'd sometimes go there alone, not knowing why they took him there. And so it took him a little while to figure out, oh, okay, so I'm not supposed to be there unless I'm escorted by someone else. Probably a common thing if, But that's not to suggest that he's necessarily trans, just when you're on the spectrum, you tend to make your own conclusions until they're disproven somehow, and then maybe you ask the question. Not always, but that was my particular experience with it. Anyway, okay. Once Adam finally knew he was a boy, it was his desire to be the metaphorical modern-day chivalrous knight. On the playground, whether it was his job on the job rotation board in class or not, he enjoyed escorting people to the nurse's office, especially females. For some reason, doing so always gave him a warm, fuzzy feeling inside. In the classroom was another story entirely. His teacher, Miss Young, had demands that Adam never imagined. Unlike Miss Vogley, she didn't enjoy talking to him and was far more demanding of him. Projects consisted of occasional in-class readings, writing, spelling, and arithmetic. He was also told to do art projects and the like regularly. It was in this classroom he learned a new lesson: time is not your friend anymore. She gave her students 15 minutes or less to do a single writing assignment, spelling task, or art project, then it was on to the next thing. Adam was good at speech-based activities, but due to dexterity issues, another autism thing, he had trouble putting his ideas on paper. It was expected that after a time he would have to write and spell words in cursive, but like many people today would say, I can't believe I was made to learn that useless skill. The difference is he never learned it. I didn't either, technically. I mean, I could sign my name, but nobody could read it. Spelling tests would turn up F's, not because he couldn't spell. Very true. In fact, he was above average at it. Also true. He just couldn't write it. Mrs. Young would often yell at him in front of the class for his incompetence when it came to writing. He felt like a total idiot, and this slowly got to him. Adam was angered by this blatant disregard for the fact that he was trying his best to make the grade. Due to disorders not well known at the time, let alone accommodated, he earned the new title, the Troublemaker. He would do everything the teacher told him not to do when he felt she was rude to him about his academic difficulties, since resorting to physical violence would have gotten him into worse trouble. It was the next best thing. Despite his antics, he managed to make some friends and had typical friendships where visitations to the home, birthday parties, and other fun things happened. Now, I grant you that some people on the spectrum, they're not so lucky. People are judgmental, and there comes a time when they won't even visit them. You know, they'll find every reason not to come to the party. It makes me sad that people would do that, you know, in this day and age. I mean, in my day, we sent invitations to everybody in the classroom so that, and it wasn't really a big deal because, you know, if they could come, they could come. If they didn't, I wasn't particularly heartbroken about it. It's just, in our day, it was pretty much, if you brought something sweet, I hope you brought enough to share with the whole class. And similar thing with birthday invitations. And so, that's pretty much what this is about. Some of his closest friends were Bonnie, Melissa, Jennifer, Jermaine, Joshua, and Leticia. Jermaine and Joshua were Asian neighbors and the only ones in his neighborhood who were. Adam never found out which Asian country their family line was from. Bonnie was a Taiwanese girl. Melissa was white with blonde hair, and Jennifer was white with brown hair. He questioned his relationship with Jennifer because she was usually mean to him unless he had goodies around. Leticia, his first African-American friend, was the most unlikely friend because Adam's first reaction to meeting her might have been misinterpreted to be racist. In other words, the same kind of disconnect between, you know, hey, what gender am I? It never occurred to him that people he might have seen on reality, only seen on TV, actually exist. That is, even though he would have seen Sesame Street and seen probably like Mr. Hooper or one of the many African Americans on that show, he'd be like, but they're fictitious, right? So that's pretty much where he was coming from with this. And as funny as it sounds to me now, I could totally get where some people would be offended if they had taken his words at face value back then. He was told most likely by Tara that everything on TV was not real. So one can only imagine the awkwardness of meeting someone of another race then. Luckily, she was cool with it and they became pretty tight, all things considered. Adam spent some time trying to be friends with Jennifer. He saw that she enjoyed doing flips on the monkey bars. This sometimes led to her getting hurt, and he wanted to make sure he could help her at a moment's notice. Other kids in the school who he didn't know had spread a rumor about him liking Jennifer. Adam didn't understand what people meant when they asked if he liked Jennifer. He thought they were talking about liking his friends, but he was sorely mistaken. Misunderstandings of like caused situations to escalate to the point of bullying. Adam was often teased by other guys. Adam didn't let it get to him, and he tried to avoid playing with others on the playground ever since. As weeks went on, his mom and dad would have their date nights and leave Kara and Tara in charge of him. This was a big mistake. Kara and Tara capitalized on Adam's fear of them when he was 4 years old. Tara enjoyed playing video games often and wouldn't let Adam play unless the parents demanded it of her. And Kara, who was content to just watch, made Adam their slave. Adam was supposed to toast waffles for them, fetch things they asked for, He also learned to cook through such enslavement. By the time he finished serving them, he had almost zero energy to do anything else, so if he wanted waffles, he ate them raw with butter and syrup once they defrosted enough. He could still recall feelings of emptiness and sorrow and fear all at the same time through enslavement. Sometimes Tara would cook for him, but only if he managed not to tick her off more than Kara. To put it simply, if he managed not to piss her off for the whole week. He would have large quantities of food, otherwise he would be on his own to make dinner. Joanne would on rare occasions catch Tara hitting him, but the worst she got was yelled at by Mom, from what one could tell. If he retaliated, even if in self-defense, he immediately got a timeout. From those combined experiences, he learned another lesson. Apparently it's okay to be hit, but not okay to defend yourself. It was at that point he realized if he tattled on them, it wouldn't do him any good. In his mind, everyone saw him as a troubled child, while Tara was the genius of the family, and maybe had a few anger issues sometimes. Adam tried everything he could to be the apple of his parents' eyes. He would happily lay out silverware at the dinner table when the parents were home and happy to hear a thank you for his efforts. Tara always seemed angry in response to Adam's acts of goodwill for the family. Despite the fact he wasn't wholly hated, he knew he couldn't unleash his anger at home nor at school. Additionally, using words to people who picked on him was useless at venting anger unless he used profanity. Realizing people got offended by a child using strong language and didn't like him hitting people even if it wasn't self-defense, he slowly became a ticking time bomb waiting to go off with minimal stimulus. This was part of the reason why Adam avoided playing with other kids. There was a chance he'd get angry. When angered, he would try to run away. If that didn't work, he'd vent his anger by swearing like a sailor. This would result in him result in them giving their signature "you're in trouble" sound. You know, that ooh. God. And I kind of seethe just remembering that. Okay. His only other option was to physically attack them. Running away wouldn't work in school because it would either require him to go off campus or leave the playground, which was not permitted unless he was escorting someone who was hurt, doing a favor for a teacher, or got hurt and had to see a nurse. The best he could hope for was not being forced to interact with other kids at all. This worked for a good portion of the semester, but then came a day when, despite trying to explain his dislike of competition and what he was afraid would happen if it got too out of hand to a recess lady, they responded by making an ultimatum. Play with the other kids or be given a pink slip. For those unfamiliar with a pink slip in elementary school, it meant one would be reported to their classroom teacher for further disciplinary action. Basically, a pink slip is what most schools call an office or classroom referral. Too many acts of defiance would result in being sent to the principal's office. Knowing this, Adam saw no way out. He gave in to her demands and said, "Fine, but if I get angry and the situation gets inappropriate or out of hand, don't say I didn't warn you." Adam reluctantly played with the other kids, and it was just as he feared. And worst of all, he got the pink slip anyway, and an unsympathetic Miss Young was waiting for him in the classroom. She said, "Get in trouble out there, you get in trouble in here. Now go change your card." Miss Young had a card system set up to control her class. If one stayed on the green card, one got a sticker at the end of the day. If one managed to get a certain number of them, which would have taken an entire school year to accumulate, especially for one like Adam, impossible, one would get a plush of one's choice from her collection of teddy bears. In fact, if Adam even pretended to hum, he'd have to go up there to change it, followed by it was a yellow card, which meant no sticker at the end of the day. Nothing else happened, though. The blue card was next, and one was sent to detention. Orange card meant not only the penalties of the previous cards, but a note home to parents, and the last card was a black card, and if one went that far, they were sent to the principal's office. It was safe to say Adam spent many days in detention and had many notes sent home. Worse still, even when he tried to be good and get his work done, he was forced to attend Saturday school because of his sloppy but improving penmanship. Only when he was allowed to print by hand rather than write in cursive did he show any progress. If that wasn't bad enough, when December came around, Miss Young ordered him to participate in singing Christmas songs despite him being Jewish. The only thing good she did for him at the time was to let his mom introduce the class to Hanukkah and make Hanukkah decorations. Otherwise, he got no special exemption for conflicting religious beliefs to not sing in it. Adam didn't mind listening to it as he'd grown used to it, being the kind of thing all kids were expected to do, but to sing them was akin to being converted to Christianity in his mind, or blasphemy to his own upbringing. It's kind of like that analogy where, well, I provide a vegetarian meal, even though none of us are vegetarian, why can't they provide a meat option for us at their house? Well, the problem is, eating vegetables doesn't go against a person who eats meat's principal beliefs, but eating meat goes against a vegetarian's principles. So if you replace vegetarianism with Judaism and carnivorism with Christianity, you'll see the problem here. That is, while the Christianity uses both the Old and New Testament, the Jewish people only use the Old Testament, but even then, it's a little bit different than the Christian Old Testament, but mostly the same sorts of stories. Anyway, okay, but I got off track, but it was just something interesting to note about this. This is probably going to be a much longer episode than I was expecting, but it's okay. I kind of wanted to get this out here. Alright. When given an ultimatum of being sent to the principal's office, he sang reluctantly and didn't bother telling his parents about the threat. When Christmas and Hanukkah came, his grandma, grandpa, and great-grandma came to visit. His grandma was so mean she would spank him for flipping a cat's ears. Grandpa was okay and often took a share of insanity from Grandma. Great-grandma would sit by herself much like Adam used to at school, and this intrigued him. He approached her and said, "I couldn't hurt you." "And I couldn't spank you," she replied. Adam smiled and began talking to her for a while, asking many existential questions about things that happen in life and why they do. He was happy to learn she was well-read and a deep thinker. Adam had finally found someone that understood him. He enjoyed playing with her, and she found a way to take the competitive feel out of any game, and get Adam so lost in conversation he'd forget he was even playing a game. Yeah, that's a pretty good tactic, because if you find someone who's hyper-competitive in most situations, if you know what they're interested in and can engage them in that while you're playing, you can sometimes take them out of that feeling. I don't meet too many people that can do that for me, though. Hanukkah was pretty standard for him, 8 nights of gifts, menorah lighting, and prayers, and this wouldn't change much from one year to the next, save the presents he got. He didn't like the taste of latkes, but he did enjoy playing the dreidel game with his family for chocolate gelt. He loved the taste of the chocolate more than most, and since he had a lot of it that year, he wanted to share the joy of them, so he slipped a few chocolate coins between the crevices of the gifts his parents made for friends and neighbors when no one was looking. It made no difference to him whether the items were for Hanukkah or Christmas. He was told the story how if not for a menorah staying lit for 8 days and 8 nights while the Israelites went to get more oil for their oil lamps, there would be no Hanukkah. The dreidel game was explained to be a loophole in the laws that forbid Jews from practicing Judaism under the rule of King Antiochus. Judah Maccabee was the one to lead the resistance and to reclaim Judea, and ultimately won. Adam figured out a much better story than one of a fat guy coming down your chimney and giving you gifts, only if you were well behaved that year and believed blindly in him. Hanukkah was probably the only time in December when care and terror weren't cruel to him. Thus, he looked forward to it every year. The rest of December and the year was fair game to them. At the end of the holiday season, each grandparent gave him and the siblings $20 from each of them. Adam had $60 to spend that year and subsequent ones that time of year. The monetary gift was matched to all family members on their respective birthdays. Adam knew he would miss the connection he made with his great-grandma when she had to go back to Michigan, and promised to send letters often. Basically, his grandparents weren't within driving distance of him unless he took a week-long road trip or longer before he even reached them, let alone got to spend a day with them. It became a hobby for him throughout the rest of the school year. He also exchanged stickers with her by mail as a hobby. When his first elementary school year came to a close, Adam was happy. He and classmates would be the last to ever have to deal with Miss Young at the school. Miss Young said she was moving to Boston. In the end, the entire class got to pick out a teddy bear anyway because no one could meet her standards when it came to behavior except one or two. And they got to pick 2 of them. Adam picked out one that was big but had slanted eyes. One of the other kids said it was blind, but Adam told him he didn't care. And that was chapter 4. Chapter 5, second grade in Little League Baseball. Not much really happens. He meets someone who's a polar opposite to Miss Young in terms of teaching, but by that point he's too jaded to really get into it. And he finds out that his mom is not that much more stable, so at a pizza place, she's like, they're feeding him pork! There's not much else worth reading from there. And then chapter 6, Adam the Sad Strange Little Man, that's pretty much talks about how when he went to Ben Lomond, and then when he was 9, he had to go to the mental hospital, and it was okay for the most part, except on his release day, they all ganged up on him and beat him up, as told in the original story. And all he did was just, all he did was play checkers by himself at first and called the lady a slob when she did 82 pickup with him. And, yeah. Lord, go to hell and wait. Cortez people attack you. I'm going to skip these because I don't want to read pretty much everything of value, especially if you want to get the book yourself. But I wanted to mainly focus on the stuff that was taken from the creepypastas specifically, or things that were also relevant to autism specifically. So Chapter 9, The Final Solution, The Unspeakable Evil. It was just one more day till the Christmas party would be held at every school Adam ever attended. Adam packed a bag of non-perishables to get himself by and a glow-in-the-dark teddy bear. He then headed for the Covina Library. Adam said in a low tone when no one was in earshot, "Someday the people here will pay for their transgressions. If these good Christians or good citizens of the larger society think it righteous to send racial and religious minorities to a mental school for being a victim their entire lives, then I want nothing to do with them." Keep in mind, the story takes place between 1990 and 2000 CE, so as I said in the first video I ever did, this isn't to be taken as a actual revenge plan, and even if I had considered it at one time or another, all those people would have been graduated, so there's no point. And I'm far from there now. Okay, back to the story. Okay. I must find a place where I belong. Surely someone out there can help me. Until then, I'd best not venture out into the world without a few survival guidebooks. Adam finally reached the library and went to the section of the library called the Book Nook, where the library sold some of its books. It was there that Adam's life would never be the same again. He found a black book written in Hebrew letters. Despite being Jewish, Adam was never taught Hebrew, and he did not attend a place of worship for Jewish people in the area. Yeah, Covina, even to this day, still doesn't have a synagogue that I'm aware of, or temple, or anything remotely like that. Never did, and so it was definitely a struggle of identity to try to keep Jewish when, my mom wasn't keen on us going to temple at the time either, even though she converted to Judaism. But there was also the, it's a long story. Maybe in an interview I'll answer it one day. He asked the salesperson how much she wanted for it, and this is kind of where I could see why they would have removed the creepypasta version of it, since it was pretty much the same kind of thing right here. I was pretty much making fun of all the creepypastas, the video game ones, where they get the game for free, because, that was such a cliche at the time. She said, "Just take it, no one else wants it." Adam took the book and asked the librarian to translate the title for him. The librarian read it and said, "Book of Necromancy, do not open." Adam looked at her puzzled. The librarian replied, "I wouldn't worry about it. The person who gave it to us seemed pretty crazy and superstitious, so it's probably nothing." Adam took back the book and went outside to read it out of curiosity, or at least see what would happen if he opened it. When he opened it, screams of ghosts and demonic spirits were heard. If anyone were watching this happen, it would look like the ghosts and demonic spirits entered Adam's body and head. Adam felt a massive rush of dark power he'd never felt before. If that wasn't strange enough, he could now read the book. It had, in the process of releasing the spirits attuned to it, transliterated itself phonetically, so he could pronounce the spells inside it. The words were translated into English so he'd know what they did. With an evil grin on his face, he said to himself, "Perfect! No longer must I suffer at the hands of the human race or my sisters." Possessed by this new power and lust for revenge for all the transgressions of the human race and his sisters, he headed home to initiate his master plan. It was group therapy night for his mom, so she was not back when he got there. His dad was still at work. His sisters had just got home from school. Tara scowled at him, sensing something was very wrong. "Wipe that stupid smile off your face before I do it for you," she said. He stopped smiling and quietly mumbled a spell to summon some undead in the backyard. Tara went to the backyard door to see for herself what was happening. She was frozen with fear and hoped they wouldn't notice her. Adam took that opportunity to go upstairs to his sister's room where Kara was sitting by herself coloring in a book. "Adam, what are you doing in our room?" Kara asked. Adam replied, "Something I should have done a long time ago. Do you remember the time you and Tara beat me up when I was maybe 4 and you guys were 13? No matter how loud I screamed in agony for Mom, your response was, 'Mom's not here.' Well, whether you do or not, I'm here to get payback for that day and for every day I was made to suffer because of your unforgivable actions and Tara's." Tara covered her head in fear, expecting Adam to hear her there. She was wrong. Adam punched her in the stomach, causing the wind to be knocked out of her. "Adam, please, stop. I'm sorry for everything, really," she slowly uttered, barely able to breathe correctly, let alone talk. "I'm sorry, but you shouldn't have joined in with Tara in making my life a living hell. You could have stayed out of it and we would not be in this situation right now. You did not, and now you're going to die," Adam said in a cold, indifferent voice. He then extended his nails. Being a cat hybrid, it was something he could have done, but never occurred to him until now to do. Adam shoved a toy in her mouth to muffle her screams so Tara couldn't hear her. Kara tried to scream for Mom. Adam replied, "Mom's not here," in the same taunting voice he remembered his sisters using when they beat him up. With that, his paw jabbed straight into her chest and ripped out her heart. Adam put it into the bathroom sink and dragged her entire body to the bathtub in the sister's bedroom and ran some water on which he put a towel to wipe up any traces of blood. Once he had cleaned it as well as he could, he carried the heart hastily downstairs to the kitchen and put it into a blender to make it into a drink. Tara was screaming at the zombies outside who were getting closer to the backyard door. There was a bat in her hands and she was ready to smash their heads in. Once the heart was thoroughly blended, he mixed it with some Kool-Aid and Gatorade and poured a cup for Tara. The Kool-Aid and Gatorade masked the smell of blood and organ fluids. Adam chanted a spell to dismiss the zombies for now. Tara came into the kitchen and yelled, "What were zombies doing outside our door?" And replied, "I have no idea, but I figured if these were our last days on Earth as mortals, I might as well make a drink for you as a final act of kindness." Tara said, "You always were a kiss ass," and I resented it, but thanks. She chugged it down because she was dehydrated from screaming. It left a bad taste in her mouth. "Ugh, what is this nasty stuff? Didn't I teach you to serve better food and drink than this?" she asked. "To answer your second question, yes you did, and to answer your first, let's just say I haven't the heart to tell you," Adam answered. Tara thought for a moment what Adam could have meant by that, and her eyes went wide. "No way. You didn't," she yelled. Adam smiled. "Well, you could check upstairs. After all, she could have just had constipation on the toilet or something." Tara hoped this was all a sick joke and followed his advice to check on Kara. Tara found Kara's body and screamed loud enough to shake the house. While in shock, his next-door neighbor, Maria, was calling 911. Adam got to work severing the landlines at home. When he was done, he called back the zombies, one of which saw Maria dialing 911 with an expression of panic on her face when he opened the backyard door to let the zombies inside. She regained her composure and ran to the landline in the parents' room to try and call 911 to find the lines were cut. No one in the family owned a cell phone at the time. Tara swore profusely and ran downstairs, hoping to make a break for the front door, only to find Adam was waiting for her. "Going somewhere, Tara?" he asked while some zombies stood behind him, awaiting his commands. You did this, didn't you?" Tara replied. Adam laughed evilly. "That's right, but you aren't going anywhere, Tara. I hated you most of all. Also, that drink was Kara's heart," he said in a sociopathic voice devoid of any remorse, sorrow, or regret. Tara was furious that Adam would kill one of his own flesh and blood and feed it to another. Tara had seen enough horror movies to know that even if she ran, Adam would catch up to her sooner or later. From best Tara figured, the best option was to try to kill him here and now. Tara lunged at Adam in an attempt to take him to the ground. Adam sidestepped to her left, causing Tara to lose her balance and trip on the crowd of zombies. The zombies began tearing through Tara's flesh and claws, eating her. Adam heard police sirens outside the door. "Come out with your hands up, whoever you are," he heard them shout through a police megaphone. "Oh, boo, it seems the fuzz has come to crash our party," Adam said. Using a spell from the book, Adam sent what remained of Kara and Tara to the center of the earth. Their bodies would never be found again. Adam flipped through his spellbook and fell into a spell to make a Deathgate portal he could use to escape the house. He quickly cast it and got out of there just as police rammed the door down. The Deathgate disappeared once Adam entered it, and he found himself at a graveyard where he plotted his next move. And that was pretty much what the first creepypasta was made into. The second one, Chapter 10, Revenge is a dish best served cold. The chaos must go on. Adam thought to himself, perfect, now that I'm here I can assess the situation at hand. The cops and forensics teams will be searching the house for a while. My next targets are Cypress's clothes are fashionable today. Lark go to hell in white, and Cortez people attack you. Then there's the Charter Oak Mental Hospital. If memory serves, tomorrow's the Christmas party, so that would be a good time for me to attack. Every kid in school will be there then. Adam slept in a tree that night. Forensics teams had blocked Joanne and David from returning home. With nowhere else to go, the two of them were given a hotel room at government expense while the investigation was carried out. The next morning, all of the kids he went to school with had made it to their first class. That was when Adam made his move. Adam's first target was Cypress's clothes are fashionable today. He ordered a horde of zombies to block all entrances and exits to the place. He commanded a pair of giant skeletal hands big enough to drag the entire school to the center of the earth with everyone inside. He sent Tracker and Dead to Boston to track down and kill Miss Young as well. The fate of Lark Go to Hell and Wait and Cortez People Attack You was no different. He took out Lark Go to Hell and Wait second and Cortez People Attack You last. Satisfied with his work, he had his zombies build for him a suitable castle on top of the former location of Cortez PAU. He filled the castle with traps. The traps in the castle design much resembled that of Fiend Lord Magus's castle from Chrono Trigger. Adam went inside his lair and began gathering weapons to take with him to use against the mental hospital inmates and the ones who called 911 on him. Forensics teams were still searching Adam's family home when the police SWAT teams and private investigators were called to investigate the former sites of the Cypress's clothes are fashionable, Lark Go to Hell and Wait, and Cortez People Attack You. Adam made a proper uniform for himself once he was inside his new lair. His uniform consisted of cargo shorts, no shirt, no shoes, and two tail holes in the cargo shorts for his two zebra-striped tails, the ones on the cover. And he untied his cat ears and removed the fake human ones. Last but not least, he sewed a Grim Reaper cloak. With his new uniform made, Adam inserted his serial killer weapons and torture devices in a magical scythe fashioned using a spell from the Book of the Necromancy in their slots. The scythe can serve as both a murder weapon and a device with which to summon more powerful undead and demonic monstrosities. Besides slashing a person's head off, it can shoot the darker equivalents to sci-fi lasers or bullets at people if desired. It is powered by both his own hatred and the hatred of the entire Earth or whatever planet he happened to be on. Safe to say Adam had almost limitless ammunition available to him, considering our world has no shortage of hatred. Ain't that the truth? Once Adam had finished suiting up, he heard sirens outside the castle. SWAT teams, police, FBI, and PIs pulled up in front of it. This did not surprise Adam at all. In fact, it played right into his plan. He cast a spell to summon an undead clone of himself. The clone was supposed to act as a decoy so the cops would stop chasing him. Adam opened a death gate to the home of the Brown family because they called 911. He knew it was them because he could see everything his undead see, so when the zombie saw him dialing 911 while in pursuit of his sisters, he saw it too. He was at the Brown residence. Police and SWAT teams stormed his base after ordering him to come out with his hands up. The FBI agents and PIs followed closely behind the police and SWAT teams. Some were sliced into human steaks by his guillotines, others got bombed running up one of his rooms, still others were devoured entirely or turned into undead by zombies in a zombie pit. The few that made it out of the hole stormed the illusion room where they swore they saw their loved ones. As they approached their loved ones, the illusions of them grew hostile and attacked them. Some were killed by them, others who were able to destroy what they swore were their loved ones, pressed on to the next room. The survivors of the illusion room found a rope bridge over a pool of lava that had to be crossed to reach Adam's private chambers. The decoy of Adam reappeared on the other side of the bridge and made a rude gesture and ran up the stairs behind it. As the survivors ran across the bridge to catch Adam, it began to spin like a hammock after one gets off of it. Despite their efforts to hang onto the bridge, the remaining forces fell into the lava. They either lost their grip on the ropes or they snapped under their weight. Meanwhile, at the Brown residence, alarms rang non-stop. Adam didn't seem fazed at all. A nearby police station got the alarm signal on their monitors from the Brown house and called some police units from many nearby cities. Seeing as there weren't a lot of groups to take on this threat, the police called the governor's office in Sacramento, California, and explained the situation. Governor Gray Davis called in state troops to assist emergency response teams. Now, I should probably mention here, I'm not mentioning these, political entities to necessarily be partisan in any way. I'm just being historically accurate because back then he was our governor at the time. So yeah, that's all it is. And I figure anybody would have done that back then. So he called in the state troops to assist emergency response teams. The police, knowing backup was on the way, stormed the house. Adam summoned some undead to take on the officers outside. The police opened fire on the undead, but a but few of them ever expected this to turn into a zombie battle. They weren't aware of what had been causing the officers to disappear, and they weren't from Michigan, so they didn't know to shoot the zombies in the head. That's kind of a reference to Dawn of the Dead, where this one guy who, calls in from Michigan says, "Shoot him in the head, stupid." Inside the house, Maria and Guy came downstairs with baseball bats in their hands. Adam threw his scythe in a boomerang motion across the room, and just as they got within striking distance, they were suddenly cut in half. Adam caught his weapon as it came back around. Nicky saw the entire thing and ran back to his room, closing and locking the doors behind him, and was able to slice through it quickly with his scythe. "You've seen too much, little Nicky. I won't let you tell a soul." He ran to Nicky, who appeared to be between the ages of 8 and 10 years old. Adam didn't know these neighbors quite as well as he knew the Major family, and even then he didn't care. "Do you like nursery rhymes?" Adam asked as he pinned Nicky to the wall and removed his slipper socks. "Yeah, you probably saw this a mile away if you saw the original creepypasta." "Well, here's one you probably already know." He cut off Nicky's big toe and set it next to a plate of fruits and vegetables. "This little piggy went to market," said Adam. Nicky screamed for Mom again. "Mom's not here. I killed her," said Adam. He cut off Nicky's second largest toe and put it in the toy house. "This little piggy stayed home," said Adam. Once more, Nicky screamed in agony. Adam cut off Nicky's third largest toe and put it next to some beef in a safe oven dish and put it in the oven to be cooked. "This little piggy had roast beef," Adam said. Adam cut off the second smallest toe and put it in an open fire until it burned to ash. "This little piggy had none," Adam said. "And this little piggy cried, 'Wee, wee, wee,' all the way home," said Adam as he cut off the smallest toe and placed it in a toy car. After screaming at the top of his lungs throughout the entire removal of the last 2 toes, Nicky passed out from the pain. "Oh, so peaceful sleeping like that. Well, my friend, only one last thing to ensure you never tell a soul." He opened Nicky's mouth and cut his tongue out, blood going everywhere. Ambulances and police vehicles could be heard outside. The police had broken into the house. "We'll meet again soon, little one, in the hospital," said Adam. He opened a death gate and waited at the nearest hospital, where Nicky was brought for urgent care. Police broke through the army of zombies and state troopers behind him. They were too late to catch him. Nicky, Guy, and Maria arrived at the hospital where Adam was waiting for them. Guy and Maria already lost too much blood to be saved. Their hearts failed and their bodies completely shut down. Nicky was patched up to stop the bleeding. The toes that remained intact were put on ice in hopes of being reattached. Adam entered the hospital and ran to another patient's room. The patient was a girl that was going to die of cancer and just finished radiation therapy. Her bracelet read Angie Steinberg. I just kind of made up that name. "Cancer's a real pain, isn't it?" "I'd like to watch you suffer, but you're not the one I'm after. I'll need a distraction to get to the one I want," Adam said as he pulled the IV out of her arm. Medical staff rushed to her aid. Adam ran to the operating room of the one he set out to kill. Nicky regained consciousness as Adam put on a doctor's mask he obtained from the other hospital room. "Hello, I'll be your doctor today. Who ordered the liver transplant?" "Don't worry, this one is on the house." Using the surgeon's scalpel, he gutted Nicky's belly, causing him to scream in agony as he pulled the IV out of Nicky's arm to deny him anesthetic. Concerned hospital staff put the IV back in Angie Steinberg's limb, then ran to where Adam was operating. Adam threw needled syringes filled with tranquilizer solution at the hospital staff and locked the door after shoving them out of the room. He ripped out Nicky's liver and forced it into his mouth like an apple in a pig's mouth for roasting. Nicky's screams were muffled as he passed out in pain and fear. Nicky's breathing stopped. Adam lit a fire and contained it in that room using a cigarette lighter that was stolen from a smoker outside and some sticks and rocks he found outside the hospital. The alarms rang loudly, and by the time the staff came to, the police broke down the door, followed by state troopers who had called in any local Navy, Army, and Marine units within a 50-mile radius of Covina. Adam was eating Nicky's liver while the rest of the body of Nicky was being roasted over the flame. Adam offered a piece of the human to one of the cops. "Are you going to help me eat this?" he asked casually. Police reached for their guns, as did the Marines, Navy, and Army units. An army of undead ambushed the underprepared units. The zombies pinned them to the ground while Adam swiftly sliced their arms off so they couldn't hold a gun with his scythe. Their actions were slower as they'd never seen anything like this and were freaked out. "Oh goody, more souls to torture," he said. The zombies threw the police, Navy, Army, and Marine units into the fire, and listened happily as they screamed in agony and croaked alive. After eating an entire child who was full and gave the rest of the bodies to his undead, the hospital staff tried to run away, but their exits were blocked. "I grow tired of these games. Torturing souls is such exhausting work," Adam said as he set the entire hospital on fire. Adam took the death gate out of the building as it burned and collapsed on everyone else inside. His death gate disappeared behind him, and he was back in his castle, resting. My traps will surely protect me while I sleep, he thought. He was exhausted from the mass killings and being on the run. He thought it was best to wait for any remaining rescue workers to give up their investigations before making his final act of vengeance. Weeks passed, and no matter how hard anyone searched Adam's house or the hospital that burned down, they found nothing to connect Adam to the crimes. And anyone who investigated the hospital or the 3 schools didn't return. There was nothing more police could do, as they didn't know who was behind all this, because anyone who came in contact with them never lived to tell of it. The last transmission received was that a catboy had gone on the top of the roof of a castle. With no family matching that description, it was quickly dismissed as a hoax. The hospital burning down was theorized as a problem with the gas lines within. The hospital was rebuilt. Adam was not the only problem. People tried their hardest to move on and resume life there. Rumors spread of people being taken to another realm where they could not escape, the restless souls. Some people came in at night on a dare and were never seen again. As people continued to disappear without a trace, the hospital was shut down, and any remaining patients were taken to another facility. Weeks passed, and a couple of people managed to come back alive, shaken by all they'd seen. Adam was watching the news to learn that he wasn't the only one killing people in the immediate area. Those he'd killed were not put to rest and were doing a lot of his work for him. I kind of got the idea for this part from Corpse Party Tortured Souls. Basically, a classroom, got killed, and so if they had like scissors in their eyes, they would stab you in the eyes with scissors if they got too close to you or something to that effect. That's kind of what I was going for here. The victims described scenes of friends dying just like the ghosts that had appeared. That is, if they had an eye cut out or other organs, the victims of the spirits would have the same happen to them. Survivors only got out thanks to the ghosts of the police and other rescue workers that died with them. The 2 survivors claimed that out of the 10 explorers, they were the only survivors. The news reporter finished by saying the victims will receive psychiatric help at a local mental hospital. The victims' names were not released due to Americans with Disabilities Act, which prohibits the release of medical records to the public. Adam smiled evilly. Perfect, I'd nearly forgotten to kill them after what they did to me a year ago. He went to the Charter Oak Mental Hospital, and sure enough, the same teenagers were there, and the staff tried to stop him. Adam, we increased their sentence for what they did to you. Not good enough, Adam yelled angrily. He summoned an army of undead. Some undead turned the staff into zombies. Others began ripping the flesh from the inmates as they screamed apologies to Adam. Adam found their leader from that day. She looked to be about 16, was fat and blonde-haired. Hi, little man, she said, shivering in fear. You thought I would never return. This little man couldn't give you the beating you deserved for what you did that day, but this one can take your pain away. Life must have been awful for you, and I'm here to liberate you from it once and for all. He drew his claws and punctured her stomach, ripping her intestines out, and showed them to her. I'm sorry, please don't kill me, she cried in pain and fear. He licked her intestines and poured salt inside her open wounds. Screams got louder and louder. Yes, scream for me. Your pain, your agony, your fear, it sustains me. He pinned her flat to the ground as he began cutting out her eyes with his scalpel as she shrieked in pain. I kind of got the idea for that from Ice Cold Lemonade from Happy Tree Friends. Yeah. I watched a lot of disturbing content when I wrote this a long time ago. Alrighty. He then decorated the sides of the container with their eyeballs after squeezing the juices out into a lemonade. They were about to have a snack at the time. Satisfied with his work. By this point, the other inmates had become fodder for his zombies. He didn't bother to clean up the mess and left a video recording in his wake. The 2 who survived the other hospital tragedy were brought in. Adam was gone, and they fainted at the grisly sight. Adam left a tape recording behind. The following is the exact message on the tape recorder. Mortals, by now you've likely seen a lot of crazy stuff. None of you know who or what was behind all this madness. By the time you finish listening to this message, you'll know exactly who did it. I cannot be stopped by mere mortals. If I'm wrong and you can kill me, the ones I have killed will continue my work in my stead. Human race has its hands full, as it is with the spirits of those I've slain. What chance do you have against one who is stronger even than them? If you're the 2 that survived the ghosts in the hospital, I know who you are and where you live. I'll take my time to find you and take great pleasure in finishing you off. That is, if the ghosts of this mental hospital don't kill you first. The time of the living is slowly coming to an end. You strive in vain as each passing day your species dies of disease, famine, war, homicide, suicide, arson, and other horrible things. Your kind disgusts me, and I've come to do God's work. The time for another cleansing of evil hath arrived, and I will be the angel of death. You may think of your fellow man as predominantly good, that you're pleased to stand up for what's right, but you're dead wrong. Even among them corruption can be found. Ain't that the truth? In this world, many others cry out in pain and are ignored as I was. Where were the police when I was 4 years old and being beaten up by my sisters mercilessly? Where were the cops when at least 11 teenagers beat me up on my release day from the mental hospital? Where were the police when just taking the bus to get to school for the mentally disturbed meant every time the bus stopped, one of the other riders would pound me in the head and in the gut? They failed to protect me, and they've been unable to protect this world. I will kill everyone who comes before me slowly and painfully, and I shall feast upon their entrails with the zombies I command. Bow before me in my legion. Perhaps I may let you live long enough to watch my empire rise. Do not even bother coming into my castle. My traps will make quick work of you and deny me the pleasure I crave in getting you myself. Yours truly, Adam the Forsaken. Now, what's different in this particular story is in the 11th chapter he has some remorse for it, suggesting that maybe he was possessed when he did all this and that wasn't his volition but something manipulating him. So yeah, whew. And that took a lot longer than I thought, so because of time, I'm probably going to skip the 11th chapter. I already kind of summed up what it was about anyway. And you've already seen the police scene from the previous one, so not much really changes there. And the 12th chapter, well, not for kids. At all. And I don't feel comfortable reading it here. Now, for the second book in the series, Nico the Inventive Wanderer, Tales of Extraordinary Beings, Book 2. This is more the archetypical example of your unapologetic smart guy. So, in the first chapter, he's born, he wins a bunch of, contests in the science fair and everything. But the chapter I wanted us to focus on was more, not so much that he can invent all these things, because, yeah, that's all well and good, but just how he interacts with his fellow students. And so, at this point, his parents send him away to a gifted school. Boy, wouldn't Adam have preferred that, right? Anyway. So, in this particular scene, it's spring break. He's thinking about going home, but he's like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to do that. And so, his roommate's name is Bates, and that kind of leads up to a rather lighthearted joke. Alright. And so, here's where it begins. Bates said, "Hey, Neeks, I heard what happened." Nico looked up at him inquisitively. "What's it to you, Bates? Most people's parents would be happy to have someone qualify for this place at my age, but not mine." Bates said, "We all got problems in life, man, every one of us. Despite it, you've always seemed so dutiful in getting projects done. But now that you got a chance to go back home for a short time, you're just going to pass it up?" Nico replied, "Yeah, but you know as well as I that my parents hate the fact I'm a genius. Why would I go home? Nico continued, "If I did, it would just be another tearful goodbye once it's over. It's not worth it to spend a week. The week will be all too brief." They said, "And I'm sure your idea of time off school is to sit around here feeling sorry for yourself. There are many others out there who'd kill to be you. For Pete's sake, you even have a special friend back home who's probably missing you now." Bates asked, "Don't you want to see her again?" Nico facepalmed. "I can't believe I'm even listening to advice from someone who spends his days goofing off with a fraternity and thinks a siphon, drum pump, and beer is living the life. But I concede you do make a solid point. I've been curious to know what Cena's been up to." Bates sighed and said, "And now you're bringing me down, and all I'm trying to do is help you. It seems in your vastly intelligent mind you've not learned that others around you have feelings too." Nico replied, "I'm well aware others have feelings, however, I don't see a reason not to tell it like it is. People have a right to know the truth." They said, "I think that's one trait I've come to appreciate about you. I may not like the truth, but in this world it's refreshing to have someone who could be honest about how I come off. It's never a mystery what you think of me." Nico said, "I'm glad you feel that way. Well, Master Bates, I'll go on one condition." Bates asked, "What's that?" "As long as you don't completely trash the room with your parties while I'm away, I will return home to see my loved ones." Bates said, You can count on me. Nico, Nico, Bobico, Pico, Tatico, Tico, Fi, Fi, Fo, Fico." Reference to the name game right there. And that was pretty much the scene that was kind of, how would someone on the spectrum possibly interact with someone if they were the gifted type? And so, I'm going to kind of skip back to kind of where the I mean, he had to battle his brothers, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The hideout, let's see. Ah, yes, chapter 12, Unholy Alliances. This is where we catch up with the Forsaken faction that's building at this point, and learn about a new one called the New Las Vegas Mafia. But for our purposes, I'm going to kind of skip that because there's not really much to talk about with the bad guys anyway, but I think a lot of us would kind of like to know where Adam would be at this point. For the most part, and, kind of know what's going on here. It should be noted that he reunited with his girlfriend in the last book, and so he's now living with her, and anyone who tried to stop him is somewhere else or dead. And that's pretty much all you would need to know to understand this part. Meanwhile, in Kavina, Adam the Forsaken was in his hideout with Christina. Adam said, "Good work trading with the humans again, Christina. They have no idea one of their own is working against them." Christina smiled and said, "But of course, Adam, we have these beautiful kitty children now and cannot live in a world that will not accept your kind," Christina said. "Also, Adam, since you don't seek to necessarily rule this world but just want a place to be you, I had an idea you might like." Adam raised an eyebrow, amused, and said, "Go on." Christina said, "Well, even though the humans don't know it was you who destroyed Kavina and would have no way to prove it, there are some people building organizations to take back Kavina and West Kavina. They're getting support from their government. You are now one of the most wanted people ever to fly under the radar." Him smirked, his eyes turned red and under the influence of the spirit within him. Adam said, "So, what was your idea? I'm dying to know." Christina said, "All right, Adam. Well, I saw some children and teenagers making plans to sneak out of surrounding cities. They want to come check this place out before the armies come in. These children are outcast geek dweebs, goths, emo kids, and basically anyone who isn't popular. As it turns out, some are human and some have been pretending to be human for a while." Adam said, "And I should care why?" Christina said, "Well, you may be able to control the dead, but isn't it nice to have a fan club or perhaps a few cultists you can count on for things the dead can't? Or if not else, a little extra support?" Adam said, "All right, go ahead and let them in, but you know what will happen to them if this is a trick. I need to go to my necromancer room so I can perform a ritual to further attune myself." Christina nodded and began accepting the new recruits while Adam meditated. Adam looked within himself and saw the spirit of the book at the necromancer. The spirit said, "I've been waiting for you, Adam." Adam said, "Who are you?" The spirit showed itself to be what looked to be a plague doctor in a beaked mask. It said, "I'm Estridex Halija from medieval England. I was one of King Henry III's finest plague doctors, and for years I studied the things under his nose that were at the time forbidden. When the bubonic plague hit England, I was finally given more leash to study my arcane arts in hopes of having a backdoor solution to it. While trying to discover a cure for it, I instead found the secret to immortality. However, it wasn't the kind of immortality that most people would desire." He said, "So I'm going to take a wild guess and say that instead of finding the cure or immortality, you figured out a way to bring back the dead?" Strudix Halley just said, "You're correct. However, I was caught when I'd summoned a low-level zombie by King Henry III. His guards promptly killed it, and I was sentenced to be hung from the gallows." Adam said, "Then why have you chosen me to wield your powers?" Estrudix Halley just said, "Because you, like me, know what it is to be misunderstood and to have the best intent in the world and be punished for being yourself." Estrudix Halley continued, "But be warned, young catboy, should your anger or sadness get out of control or fear, the powers will control you like they did when you attacked the people who had wronged you." Adam said, so it wasn't you that attacked the ones I hated?" Estrudix Halley just said, "No, I'm just the medium through which the powers are channeled. The first necromancer." Adam said, "If you were from England, then why was this book written in Hebrew?" Estrudix Halley just said, "I needed a way to disguise my studies. I put in a language I thought King Henry III didn't know. I may have underestimated him, though. I thought that since the Jews were forced out of England in 1290 by his grandfather, King Henry I, that none of the royal family would know Hebrew. So that book you wield is the culmination of my research and words you can use to control the restless dead. It was all I could do before being put to death." Strudix Halley continued, "Also be warned that the ones that were slain will come back to get you sooner or later. You can keep them under control by either killing people or carving words into your arm, or having someone else cut you up somehow. Adam said, "How often should I have to do this?" Astrudex Saliga said, "Well, considering you slew so many, you have complete control over the ones in my book, but those that aren't yet attuned to the book will need a blood sacrifice before you can capture them." Adam said, "There is just one thing." Astrudex Saliga asked, "Yes?" Adam asked, "How did you become one with a book like this?" Astrudex Saliga said, "Upon being put to death, my soul was swallowed by the book, and I'm now the personification of everything evil within it. For centuries, I've had some different holders, none of whom were worthy of harnessing the powers of this book. And then you came along." So basically, from England to the new land, other mysterious entities had, like me, picked the book and carried it here until eventually it was rediscovered and donated to a library. Astrudex Saliga said, "This is the simplest answer for it. However, you may be aware that those unworthy got sucked into it when they tried to take it from you, right?" And I replied, "Yes." Astrudex Saliga said, "That only happens when the chosen necromancer has opened it. The reason it didn't happen before is because the one destined to awaken it hadn't yet opened it. Without that happening, it would have only been a strange book in Hebrew letters to anyone else, so no one had any reason to think the magic inside it existed. The one who ultimately brought it to the library was a Wiccan. She thought it might contain a new form of magic, but couldn't read it. She happened to be in Kavina and dropped it off at the library." I said, "That makes a lot more sense. I'm sensing entities with strange energy signatures now." Astrudex said, "That is part of the attunement ritual. You can now sense other entities like yourself." I said, "There are 2 in Yosemite National Park, another in Torrance, one in Death Valley, Nevada. I also sense several forces preparing an attack. This could be big." Astrudex nodded and said, "Yes, you must prepare to take them on. It won't be longer than a year before they make their move. Ready yourself. This could very well be a battle for the world itself, and we cannot be concerned with the other entities outside our reach. We have to protect what is ours. We can worry about them once all of our known domestic issues are solved. So, make this a refuge for all who have even a tuft of fur on their chests, heads, or tails, and welcome all who will fight for you in." When I finally came out of the meditation as Christina was bringing in the Forsakenists, air quotes. And began the meeting of the Forsakenists with Christina bringing snacks and drinks. The meeting was held in the Kravina Playhouse. And I asked, "All right, humans, hybrids, furries, and whatever. I understand you are all aware that people who came here had a tendency to disappear, correct?" They nodded. Adam continued, "Well, I found a book of amazing abilities, and long story short, the powers were too much for me to handle. As a result, this place is a ghost town in both senses of the word." A dead silence filled the room. Adam said, I know. Listen, I don't want to rule the world or anything like a cliche cartoon or other media. We portray those of the dark side to want. All I wanted was to live life on my own terms and not get my ass kicked by every last human who saw me. And to be a righteous cat person I was brought up to be. My parents, when they saw what I could do, ran away. I couldn't bring myself to kill them. I knew that although they weren't around when stuff was getting horrible for me, they tried to help. But there was nothing they could do. They made the right choice leaving me here alone. You guys are girls or whatever you identify as. I know you're different than the rest. You too know what it is to be treated like trash by others, to be sneered at, to be alone inside, and to be in the wrong time period or place. I know how it feels more than you know. I was there, so I grant you the opportunity of a lifetime. You can have a haven worth living in on Earth, one that lets you live life on your own terms, and find what it is you do best and do it. Or you can go back to your families, forget you ever saw me, and hope that your families won't be in the wrong place at the worst time. Many different factions will vie for control of this site and others like it. War is coming, you must choose wisely. Live here and I shall protect you with all my life. Leave, and I hope you have adequate life insurance or protection wherever you are. Make your choice. They spoke it over for a while before having someone speak for them. It was a young African-American female human. She said, the name is Daniel, and I believe I speak for all of us when I say we can all relate to your plight. Though it is questionable if death is the answer, no matter what we do from here on out, there is a risk that we will die. So if that is to be our fate, we shall do the fighting for what we believe in. Him said, very well then. I shall grant each of you a few helpful abilities. He flipped through his book of necromancy and found a spell that enabled him to give dark powers to others. He cast a spell on all in the room and could now shoot dark flames out of their hands and feet. He could also use it to fly like a rocket or blast enemies away or roast their enemies. They could also summon a few dark creatures as well as dark versions of all kinds of elements. This included dark ice, dark earth, dark lightning. Basically, any form of magic could be turned dark in addition to the dark flames. Furthermore, if they had physical abilities, such as martial arts, those were heightened significantly. All were in awe of their new powers and grateful. Tim said, remember, these dark forces are not just weapons of war, but also your shields, too. Remember well the darkness, and you may portal out of situations and raise a shield to protect yourselves. Remember well who it was that allowed you to manifest your destiny, and never forget why you sought to be undarkened. The Forsakenness were about to leave the meeting and claim their new homes and businesses when out and interrupted them. And said, before you go, remember, Mom's not here. If you hear that, someone's time is up. They nodded and left the base, preparing for the inevitable war. With that, we turn our attention away from Adam and friends and back to the real character of the story. Not to worry, there will be more of this to come in the second series and possibly in book 3. I said, hey writer, that isn't fair. You got all this readers excited, and for what? The other responded with a tired sigh. All things in good time, my friend. Adam asked, the real character of the story? Without me, no one could relate to any of this at all. Also, people typically pay their actors, you know. The writer responded, I would, but how am I to get the money in my world into yours? And said, write the payment into the story. It won't cost you anything. But I replied, no, sorry, you have to earn it through events in the story like everyone else. Besides, you have more than enough toys and things in that abandoned mall in West Covina and all the small mom-and-pop shops you forced out of town. I said, now you make me sound like a corporation. Both the writer and Adam the Forsaken laughed as the next chapter began on schedule. And that was his appearance in book 2. And I've already kind of read Kit Kit and Kit Kat, but I should probably mention where he comes in. Let's see. You know what? I'm getting kind of tired. I've only had 3 hours sleep today. I worked both jobs, and so I'm probably not going to read all of this right now. But let's see. Did anything worth talking about happen here? Well, in chapter 6, you know, a scene happens where the Covina's militia invades Covina, and you know that battle happens, and not much to really do with autism here, but he does get really dark with it to some extent, you know. But I think probably where he gets to be the worst is has to be in the 4th book. I mean, there's this one chapter where he attacks a train because in that 3rd book, this guy has the bright idea to defect from one of the factions, come down and try to use them to take over the world. Yeah, like that'll ever work. And after playing with him and doing what looks like a staring contest, which ends up, you know, demonstrating a power he has where he can basically get inside your mind and kill you within without you having to sleep. Totally not Freddy Krueger, you know, right there. or Itachi from Naruto. He decides to cut off the train systems, and so in either chapter 8 or 9, because, you know, this is the book where it all comes together. It comes to be that he attacks the trains to cut off the way in and out, so his Forsakenness can control it. So this one mother and her son are begging to be spared, and touched by that, he comes over and does a little bit of an experiment whereby he rends their flesh and soul into different monsters that he can command now. And, you know, there were dancing zombies doing a Hava Nagila, but with them saying brains, so like brains, Nagila, brains. And, yeah, he was pretty messed up in that sense. And, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, In this particular book, Isaac's also Jewish and he's human and he's supposed to be the protagonist there, so he's supposed to kind of stop this guy from doing whatever else. It very much resembles that internal conflict that a lot of people on the spectrum may face within themselves, such as, so, you know, when I'm in a state of meltdown, just as an example, you know, there's that part of me that's like, yes, I must. These people deserve, you know, my wrath, my vengeance. And then there's that part of me that's like, no, stop. This isn't you. You can do better. And so I have to get myself out of that situation while my conscience battles it out with my urges to do things. And thankfully it doesn't happen very often these days, but it becomes enough of a concern in the right circumstances that I know kind of what to avoid. And I find as long as I take care of myself, I don't really find that to be a problem in most of my work. But yeah, that was pretty much, you know, the Monster Mondays and how these characters are supposedly on the spectrum, even if I didn't intend them to be. If it's not apparent by their dialogue or some of the difficulties they have or some of their attributes, there's a lot going on in these, and I really don't want to spoil too much more than I already have. I just thought I thought some people might want to see where, you know, how the creepypasta evolved into the first story for that part, and then the rest maybe just a synopsis of events that are key. That said, I thank you for tuning into Monster Mondays today. This has been the Forsaken Scribe, and remember, Mom's not here. And, oh, one last thing. Don't forget, I still have my Autism Poem, which I will recite on Wednesday after writing the Poem of the Week. And the Poem of the Week, I'm going to try to top that one somehow on the subject of autism. And all proceeds that don't go to shipping or other expenses will go to Autism Self Advocacy Network. Because sometimes we want a little something to remember our donation by when we help others, or maybe we just don't want them to be calling us back soliciting more donations. So if I make the donation on your behalf, you not only avoid the hassle of having to deal with constant calls from the company, if they do operate that way. I don't know that ASAN does, but I know a few other charities do. And I totally respect it, you know. But, yeah. It can be quite bothersome for people, and I'd be happy to help people do good, get something for it, and not have to deal with all that. So, all that said, it's been fun, and I wish you a safe month, you know. Do what you gotta do to stay with it, and if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, my social media is in the link below, as is anything else you might need to know. Thank you, and goodbye. Alright.